Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants Hangout. My name is Joe Grabowski, and I will be your host for today. You might notice it's a little darker on my screen today. I'm squirreled away in a corner of the airport in Austin, Texas, so hopefully the signal will hold out for us. I'm very excited for today's Hangout. Today we're connecting with Canadian filmmakers Garry Tutte and Alan Poon. They have just completed a documentary called Nests of Gold, tracing the path of one of the world's most expensive delicacies, bird nest soup, from where the nests are harvested right to the restaurants. So we've got a great group of classrooms joining us from Canada and the United States, and they'd all received a code earlier so they could check the documentary out beforehand. So Garry and Alan, it's very exciting to have you joining us today. We're excited for a little look behind the scenes, to hear some stories, and then to give the classrooms an opportunity to ask you guys some questions today.
Great. Awesome. Yeah, we're happy to be here, guys. This is really cool. We get to share the experience and journey behind the film with you. So did everyone get a chance to watch it? Like, just, I don't know, by a show of hands, kind of? Yeah, kind of, some people? Okay, that looks pretty good. That looks pretty good. Yeah, there's a lot of hands. All right, all right. Well, yeah, so I'll tell you what, why don't we, so I'll give a little introduction about myself. So I'm Garry Tutte. I'm a documentary filmmaker. I do a lot of work with video and editing and that type of thing, and traveling to different parts of the world to tell different stories. And I've been doing that for probably about, I don't know, maybe 10, 15 years. Grew up in Ottawa. Now we're in Toronto now, and I live in Toronto now. And that's actually where I met the uber talented Alan Poon. So he can give a little introduction about himself.
Hi everyone, my name's Alan, and yeah, originally from London, Ontario. Went to Wilfrid Jury Public School, and then Central Secondary School in London, and then moved out to Toronto for university, where I studied new media at Ryerson University. And then from there, developed a love for film. Working in film, it's great. It's really collaborative, and you get to meet lots of people on every project. And I've been fortunate enough to get to travel to a lot of different places for work as well. So it's been great. I mostly work in documentary. I also work now on narrative films as well, so scripted films as well. But documentary is great because you get to see the world, learn about different people and all kinds of stories. So I mainly have worked for other people on documentaries, and for Garry and I, this was our first short documentary, working from the very earliest stages of coming up with what it is we want to film, all the way through filming and through editing. And actually, this is probably our first real chance to share kind of our behind the scenes of making film. So thank you very much for being here and listening.
Yeah, actually, the timing is kind of neat too, because you know, this is, we'll go into some of the behind the scenes stuff, but now that the film's finished, I guess, you know, some people might be, you know, wondering where you see it. And so what we're currently doing is, you know, the first year after finishing the film, what we're doing is submitting it to film festivals all around the world. And actually today, the film screened in Dublin, Ireland, at the Silk Roads Film Festival. So that's kind of neat. And it's screened in Seoul, Korea. We actually won the jury award there. And it's screened in festivals in Wolfville in the east coast of Canada, and in Nova Scotia, and then also screened at the Real Asian Film Festival here in Toronto. So that's kind of the current life of the festival. And then once it's done screening at these film festivals, so you guys kind of got a sneak peek. And once it's done screening at these festivals, then it'll go on to hopefully find a home on some kind of, whether it's television or, you know, sort of Netflix sort of options, that type of thing, right? So that's, you know, and that's ultimately, our goal for this film was ultimately just to make it. So we're happy that it got made, but we're even more happy now that a lot of people are getting to see it, and it's generating a lot of questions and a lot of you know, curiosity out of a lot of people that have seen it. So and we'll get to that too. If you guys have any questions, we can answer those a little later on. What I'm going to do is, just on the off chance that you guys haven't, or just as a refresher maybe, I'll play you, I'm going to share my screen, and then I'll play you the trailer of the film. I'm just going to open that now so we can have that ready to go, and you guys can at least take a peek at that. Did we also end up with another group joining us there, Joe?
Yeah, another classroom managed to come in.
Oh, great. Okay. Hey, guys. Nice to see you. Alan and Garry here. Glad you could make it. Okay, well, so I'll tell you what. I'll play that. Nice. All right, I see you guys. Hi. Yeah, okay, so I'll tell you what. I'm just gonna play the teaser, sort of the little trailer for the film. Just in case there's some of you that haven't had it, it'll give you a little background on sort of what we're dealing with. And I'm going to try to share my screen. Let's see if this works. Oh, yeah. There's Joe. Okay, hang on. Gonna move him. Now, you guys can still see me, right? Sure you can. Okay, so I'm going to play this, and then it's about 1.5 minutes, and then we'll take you through some of the behind the scenes after.
即係和下西洋嗰陣時咧，喺東南亞地方咧，就揾啲好嘅嘢翻嚟中國朝聖咧，所謂咁啊，燕窩係其中之一。
Bird's nest soup is traditionally implanted in us. We all feel that it's very healthy.
Bago po ako nag-akyat, nag-panalangin muna po ako. Ay ko, Diyos na ang pambahala sa akin na kung ano mangyayari sa akin na nag-asuot po ako ng matataas.
歡宴咧就好耐歷史，如果冇呢個餸咧，好似唔係好做粵菜。
呢啲唔係算最大隻，如果最大隻嗰啲價錢好貴嘅。
The top variety is called the Poon yin. Poon is like a statesman or the ruling class. It's not for the commoner.
Okay, so that is the trailer for the film. And where are you guys? Okay, there we go. And so that sort of gives you a little background. It looks. Oh, hang on. Yeah, that's all right. Oh yeah, I see what you're saying. Those guys are on. I'm gonna bring us back. It's gonna work. Hang on. Still dealing with the technology. Oh, there we go. We're back. Sweet. All right. Okay. So that's bird's nest soup. That's kind of what it looks like, and a little bit of the background of how it, like where it comes from. And actually, Alan's got a personal story, sort of a connection to it.
Yeah, so how this project started was my grandfather, who I didn't know very well before he passed away, was a bird's nest soup, or a bird's nest merchant, I should say, a dried goods bird's nest merchant in Hong Kong. And growing up in Canada, I didn't know anything about bird's nest. I didn't know what it was. And I think a lot of people in North America haven't heard of bird's nest soup before. But in Hong Kong and in China, bird's nest soup is considered a delicacy, and it's something that the Chinese believe if you eat the soup, it will beautify the skin and you will live longer by eating the soup. So the soup, in effect, becomes very expensive, and even some restaurants, like the restaurant we went to, it's over $100 for a bowl of soup.
Little bowl, little itty bitty bowl.
So this first started as a project to learn more about my family history, and then from there it became a project that we decided in the short format, something around the 15-20 minute mark, might be best told if we follow the ingredient itself. And we end up following the ingredient from the caves of the Philippines where they're made. And so also just so everyone understands, the bird nest itself is not made of sticks and stones. It's actually made from the saliva of these special birds that live in the Philippines and Thailand, Indonesia, Southeast Asia.
Yeah, it's spit. The nests are made from spit.
It's essentially bird spit that hardens when it comes in contact with air. So it's a very strange thing that happens, and we follow the nests from a very remote cave in the Philippines.
And actually, here I'll tell you what. I'll screen share again. I'll get rid of our ugly mugs. I'll show you your faces for a sec, and then I'm gonna bring up. Let's see here if I can do. Oops, see if I can get this on a map. But I don't. You guys may or may not know where the Philippines are. So actually, this is great. You can see dots where we were. So if I zoom out here a bit, this is China. So we're way over here. Disregard the yellow marks of places I've been. We can get into that later. But yeah, so we're obviously in this area here. So we flew across over Europe, and we ended up over in this section here in the Philippines, right? So Vietnam, Thailand, in this area. And where we went, and I'm going to show you some pictures in a sec, is to this little island, wee little island off the coast of Taytay here, right? So we were actually on islands sort of out in this area here. So let me get up some photos here. Ah, yes, the departure. So this is Alan with the bags. We took a lot of camera gear with us when we went, and this was sort of the piles of luggage we had for all the different camera gear. We brought a drone as well to film from the air. Okay, and then when we got into Hong Kong, this was actually Cal Gore, who was one of our contacts there, who worked with your grandfather, Alan.
Yeah.
And so we these are some of the nests. So these are the nests once they've so that's the bird spit hardened, and then it's after it's been cleaned and all the dirt and everything's been picked off of it, and this is sort of brought back to Hong Kong. And there's sort of another one you can see, sort of the texture of it. And this is us filming in one of the bird's nest shops in Hong Kong. It's actually one of the oldest nest shops in Hong Kong. And this is Hong Kong at night. So initially we had flown into Hong Kong, and then we flew down to the Philippines. So once we got down to the Philippines, we were going to be camping out on this island where the nests make their, where the birds make their nests. And it's a pretty remote area, so we had to bring groceries with us. So we bought a lot of rice and various groceries. We piled it all into a car. So now we're down in the Philippines here. And this was sort of the town of Taytay where we departed. And we headed out on these little outrigger boats they have down there. So this is us loading everything in. And then we got to the island where there were no restaurants. There was, everyone is sort of living more or less on the beach. There was a couple of huts, and all the cooking that they were doing was seafood or sea cucumbers, different animals from the water that they would be fishing and harvesting, and that's how they would sort of live while they were harvesting in the months where they were harvesting. This is a waterproof flashlight using the inner tube of a car tire or a bike tire. So they just wrap their flashlights up to keep them protected from the water, but also to keep them from sinking to the bottom of the water or getting bashed up in the cave if they fall. And this is an actual sort of this is the first nest we saw. This is like a half-made bird's nest that's attached to the wall. You can sort of see the part that's anchored to the wall, and then there's a little bit of the spit progression, if you will, on there. There were some other critters crawling around in the cave, so this was a bug we came across. This is one of my favorite shots. This is Alan going from one cavern to the other. Some of the areas we were in were huge and open, and some were really small and claustrophobic, and so we had to kind of crawl around. And then our sort of life, and on the left here is Rika. She was our Filipino fixer. She was basically our point of contact that did all our phone calls for us and connected us with the people at the islands, and we really couldn't have made the film without her and her knowledge. And this was sort of how we ate. So we're not eating bird's nests here, obviously, but we're just eating, seafood and rice and the type of food we brought with us while we were making the film and doing all the shooting.
And Rika was also our translator.
Yeah, she provided the translation because they speak Tagalog there, which, if any of you speak Spanish, it does sound a little bit like Spanish, and then and then maybe a language that you've never heard before. That's how it was for us anyway. So this was, there's two islands. There was an island we sort of stayed on, which is what you're seeing here, and this is the extent of the beach. There's only a tiny little bit of sand, and then the other big island in the distance is where these birds live and where they harvest the nests from the birds. So we took a boat ride over to that other island and took a run around it. So you can see there's not a lot of beach there, not a lot of places to hang out. And they do have, there's another sort of perspective looking back at the other island. They built these little huts so that they can sort of hang out and have access to the island and also have a place to sleep, because again, there's not a lot of beach to stay on. So you've really got to get smart about where you stay when you're harvesting. You can see the little house there on the tiny little rock. And then this was sort of our departure point to get into the caves. So we got onto the little beach here. We hiked up into the caves. We had to climb up with some ropes. And then we entered the mouth of the cave that goes inside that island. So the entire inside of, where is it? Like the entire inside of this island is basically one big cave system, right? So once we climbed up and got into it, this is one of the harvesters. You know, this is sort of the cavernous interior of that rock or of that island. And so you can kind of see, and then they would climb further up. They're kind of going up the side there. You can see their tiny little people going up inside the cave. And that's Alan climbing up. The rocks were really, really sharp. It was limestone, which can get pretty jagged and cut your hands up. So good idea to wear gloves. So we climbed up in there and we followed them on their journey, harvesting the nest, their process of, you know, climbing. And safety is an issue. They don't wear a lot of ropes. They don't wear any. They climb up basically free soloing, they call it, where you just climb with no ropes or anything, and it's quite dangerous. They sometimes tie a rope to their waist, but here you can kind of see how they operate. And so they would literally just use like a bent fork to scrape the nests off. And they'd climb all around there, and then slowly but surely, like a nest at a time, they'd scrape them off. And this is, you can kind of see the nests in someone's hand there. That's what they look like right when they're plucked off the wall. There's still some feathers and stuff in there. And this is typically before the birds lay their eggs. So what they do is they let the bird build a nest, they harvest it, then they let the bird the nest again and lay the eggs, right? And so the idea is that they're taking a nest, which is kind of mean, I suppose, but then they're also letting it build another one and then letting it have its babies so that they continues to be nests for them to harvest and make a living, right? So it's a bit of a reliance on the birds and having them come around to make it sustainable. This is a battery charger that they invented for their cell phones there. They just wrap up a piece of cardboard and stick a bunch of D-sized batteries in there and wire it to their phone, which I thought was kind of neat. And again, they'll use bamboo poles here to access small little cracks and get into different parts of the cave. You can kind of see an opening to a cave in the upper right of this photo. And then they're basically getting dropped off by boat at the water's edge on the bottom left. And they'll bring a big bamboo pole to use them to get them access up into the cave. This is some more nests. They take on different colors based on the different minerals in the rocks. So if the nest is built on something that has more, say, iron in it, then the iron ends up being kind of reddish like this, right? So a lot of times the nests take on different colors, which does ultimately impact the value. Kind of see a close up there. This is Alan on the island. And then we were sort of basing ourselves out of this little hut that they gave us. It was the only hut on that island. But it was so hot that we ended up camping out on the beach most of the time. It was about 40 degrees at night, so you're just sweating sitting there. That was one of the biggest challenges, I think, was the heat, eh? Here's Alan getting ready to fly his drone, setting everything up and calibrating it, putting the memory card in. And then ultimately, actually, I guess that's the drone taking off there. This was the big opening shot, if you guys remember, kind of coming across the water and tilting up and seeing the island. This is what we were filming that day. Off it goes. The nest harvesters thought the drone was quite interesting, so they hung out. And this is camping out on the beach. So you can see there's not much beach there. We basically have the rock at our back, and then we put our tents here. So that's the two of us camped out on the beach in the heat. And the water was quite beautiful. It was really warm, but there was also about 1 million little jellyfish in it this time of year. So as much as we always had the urge to run in and swim, you had to give a second thought, or at least take a good rinse after, because you'd be covered. That was the generator they had there that we ended up charging our batteries on. So it was an old car engine that had been modified and gave us electricity through these plugs that you had to be very careful while plugging things into them. That's another one of the harvesters hanging out. That's Muck Muck. He's sort of the young boy that's harvesting in the film. He's fishing there. And then this is sort of some of us shooting inside the cave. Alan's at the camera there, and we're getting everybody sorted out to film their entrance. And these guys are hauling some of the bamboo sort of trunks they use to get access to the more remote places in the cave. And they would just scurry around and climb on these rocks. There's also a lot of bats in these caves, so often the rocks would get really slick and slippery from bat guano or bat poop, and that made, I got covered in it a couple of times. It was a challenge to navigate, let's say. Doesn't smell very good either. So again, we got Alan filming. Those are the bird's nests and the hands there. You can actually see too, the harvester in the purple shirt there on the left has got that waterproof flashlight strapped to his head like a headlamp. So they'll put them up there so they have both hands free for climbing. And there's Muck Muck with some nests that he harvested and his flashlight strapped to his head. And that's the island there, sort of the little edge of beach and the buildings they have. The building on the far left is sort of where they would gather together and clean up the nests, and the building on the far right is where we stayed, and that's almost the full length of the beach there. So that's the only little sliver of beach on these two islands. Another drone shot. And we did try the bird's nest. So they basically dissolve the nest into water, and they often mix it with something to give it flavor, because it doesn't have a lot of flavor. And so in this particular case, they mixed it with just those, those like cup of noodle soup kind of packages. That's basically what they mixed it in there. So what you see in there is mostly the noodles from the soup, but then also the bird's nest has been dissolved in the hot water and stirred in with it. And I think you can tell how effective the bird's nest soup is because Alan and I look so incredibly young. So that's us on the island having the soup. I got a fantastically bad sunburn. Wear sunblock if you go to the Philippines. And that's us leaving the island. So that the island on the left is the one that we stayed on, and the island on the right is the one that has all the caves in it, and that we would go over to on a daily basis to climb up into the caves and do the filming. And then ultimately, after the Philippines, we ended up back in Hong Kong, where we did some more filming with Chef Kwong here, who is a 3 Michelin star chef, a really sort of highly awarded and honored chef who makes soup out of it, and they serve it at their restaurant. And it's, like Alan's saying, it's about $100 US a bowl, so that's probably about maybe $130 Canadian for a bowl. And sort of, pretty elegant restaurant. And then our chaos with cameras and lights descends upon the elegant restaurant. And so that's sort of, that's sort of a quick little behind the scenes of some of the filming we did. Let's see if I can find you guys and get you back here. I don't even know if there's anyone still there. Can't see you guys right now. Oh yeah, they're still there. They're still there.
Yeah.
I'm gonna pop out of here and bring our video back. Yeah.
All right, you're back. Well, guys, thanks so much for sharing those behind-the-scenes pictures. That time on the island looked challenging, but absolutely incredible.
Yeah, it was quite the experience. I think, for me at least, probably the most remote place I've ever been to. But yeah, I mean, I guess the great thing about the Google Hangouts is if anyone has questions or comments, and we can chat about stuff. There's lots probably to talk about. I don't know.
Absolutely.
If
can you guys still hear me okay?
Yeah, can hear you, Joe.
Okay, good. I got kicked out once or twice because of the Austin airport Wi-Fi, but I was able to get back in quickly. So if I get booted out again, it takes me about 20 seconds to get back in. But if you guys are ready, let's meet some classrooms.
Yeah.
All right. So let's go with our first class. Let's visit Mrs. Langer's class in Cobourg, Ontario. They're a grade 6-7 class. Let me turn on their microphone. How are we doing today, grade 6-7s?
Good. Grade 1. You waiting for a question? You waiting for a question, Joe?
I have a question.
Sorry, I think you can go to another classroom, Joe. What was the question? Oh, no, we're good. We're good right now. Pardon?
Oh, okay. We'll come back to you guys then.
Thank you.
Or do you have one?
Yeah, Dylan. Sorry. We were chatting with the
That's
person
okay. Here comes.
so okay.
So how many nests are in one cup of soup?
Oh,
Good question.
I actually don't know for sure. Probably what we were guessing, like maybe 3 or 4.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, right? So the way they often serve it, right, is it's because it's so expensive. It ends up sort of being a fancy, formal affair when you order the soup. And actually, in case you guys didn't hear, the question was how many nests in one bowl of soup. And so often what they'll do is if it's a big sort of, let's say it's someone's birthday, they'll get together and they'll order the bird's nest soup. So what they'll do is they'll end up bringing a really big bowl of it, right? And then they'll sort of cook it all up into that and then serve out individual bowls of soup from that, right? Or like as you see in the film, they'll actually just serve you your own bowl of bird's nest soup. So I suppose depending on how big of a bowl of soup you get, I think you could end up with anywhere from, we sort of did the math and we ended up reaching out to the kitchen too after, the chef after, to ask because we weren't sure ourselves. But probably between 1 and 2, I think, nests per bowl of soup, you know, so.
And the other thing is in Hong Kong and China where it's most popular, you can either have the soup salty or sweet. And in our film, the chef makes it salty. He makes it with chicken and different seafood to kind of flavor it and make it more fancy. But actually, I think the few times I've had it, I liked it sweet. And a lot of people like it sweet as a dessert. So you would have it with mixed in with sugar and coconut milk. And
all right. Well, great question. Let's jump over and let's meet another classroom. This time, we're going to meet Mrs. Karsh's classroom. Can you guys still hear me okay?
You're cutting in and out a bit, but we hear you.
Okay. Well, if you guys can hear me okay, I'm going to introduce Mrs. Karsh's classroom, and then maybe I'll reset my computer really quickly because it did slow down a little. So Mrs. Karsh's class is a grade 7 class, joining us from Markham, Ontario, and I'll turn their microphone on for them.
Let's ask questions.
Who's going first? Daniel's going first.
Okay.
Hey guys.
Hi. Hi. How long did it take to film the whole documentary?
That's a good question. So we started working on the documentary. And sorry, the question was, how long did it take to film the whole documentary?
Yeah.
So we started working on it. I would say the whole process probably took us about 2 years, but the actual filming of the documentary, that was largely because we were doing other work in between and jumping, we'd spend some time organizing it, coordinating with Hong Kong, and then waiting for the season where they harvest the nests, and then we would go over. So in the end, what we did is we did 2 trips. We did one trip to Hong Kong, and then we went to the Philippines for about, it was probably a 2-week trip. So we go to the Philippines for 2 weeks. Is that true?
About 1 week.
Yeah,
10
days.
10 days, yeah.
And so we probably spent about 7 days on the island, and then we spent a couple of days in Hong Kong, and then we ended up going back for a second trip to Hong Kong to finish that part of the story, right?
Did about probably 20 days of shooting.
About 20 days, 3 weeks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Who's next? Another one? Got another question?
Oh, Joe. Yeah, we lost Joe, eh? Oh no, Joe's back.
Who's next?
Let's go. Matt's going.
Matthew.
How did you get interested in this topic?
Well, I got interested in it because Alan came to me with this idea. But Alan's grandfather was involved in the bird's nest soup business, right? So when actually, there's a great story about your dad.
When I was younger, my dad had occasionally told me stories about growing up in a bird's nest shop in Hong Kong, and so I would hear stories about how my dad and his brothers and sisters would have to live in the store, and after the store closed, then they would move the table out to the middle so that they could have dinner. They didn't want anyone knowing that they were living in the store. And my dad would sleep, he remembers stories of sleeping under the stairs on burlap bags filled with birds' nests. So I heard a lot of these stories, and I didn't know what bird's nest was, what it looked like, what the soup tasted like, or anything. So this started at first as an exploration in my family's history, and then we decided to make this film out of it.
And this is actually, I just realized I had one of the nests sitting here that we didn't eat. Thought it would be good to have one. But you can kind of see, right? So this is about the size of them, and they would be mounted on the wall like this, right? So that would be sort of how they stick to the wall. And right now they're really, this one's really brittle. Like it's almost like a cracker, like it would snap if I bent it. But when you first get them, they're really squishy. Like they're almost like I don't know, like almost feel like rubber or something. You know, like the texture of them. It's really, you know, they have a lot more moisture. I suppose they have a lot more spit at that point. So anyway, they're kind of freaky.
I'm going next.
Very cool.
Yeah.
I think I'm back in. You guys able to hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah?
how long does it take?
All right, so were we just taking questions from Mrs. Karsh's class?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think one more question.
There might be another question.
Okay.
Yeah. How long does it take to build the?
Now we'll come back to your class if there is time.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Okay. How long does a bird need to make its nest?
Good question.
It's another very good question. I believe they have about 3 cycles within a season, and they start around November, December, and the season ends in April. So I think it's probably about a month and a half. Does that make sense? A month and a half, I think, to approximately, right?
Yeah.
To build a nest.
Yeah.
It takes quite some time.
So what the birds end up doing is they fly out during the day. They leave the cave and they go out all day, and they basically look for food and fish and whatnot, and then they bring that back. Well, they eat it, right? When they come back, then they spend the evening building their nests, and they're kind of neat because they fly partially by sonar, so like they can see, but they also fly by sending out like a pulse, kind of like a bat. And so they can fly into the dark caves and still be able to navigate through the caves. And then they'll find their nest, which is even more amazing because there's a lot of them. And then at that point, they'll basically be regurgitating their spit to make the nests. And then, yeah, slowly over the course of, say, a month, you know, I don't know if you remember that one photo, but there was one photo that just sort of had a partial nest built. And then in the week we were there, I assume it had gotten close enough to be finished, and it actually got harvested because it was gone by the time we left. You know.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Stop.
Is Joe there?
We're still here. Hello.
You guys are still there. I can hear you guys loud and clear.
Oh, we're
We can ask another question.
I can't.
Another question? Ask another question.
Logan.
Sorry.
You know what we've done, by the way, guys? We have hijacked the Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants because Joe's gone, and now it's just us.
We had a couple kids wondering how long it takes to become a filmmaker. So how long you have to be in school for?
Ah, that's a pretty good question. I like to think that I'm still learning how to become a filmmaker, so I feel like it's an ongoing process. But I mean, my background, so I grew up in Ottawa, and I went to Algonquin College there for the television broadcasting program they have, and that was a 2-year program, and that sort of taught me the basics, which I think was a really good starting point. And then from there, especially now, like the technology, like the cameras aren't as expensive as they used to be. So it's easy enough for, you know, any of you to get a camera, or I mean, you know, a lot of people have cell phones too, right? And these cell phones have amazing cameras in them now, right? So, you know, when you have access to a camera and then you find a story you want to tell, and you have the basics in storytelling, which you can pick up at, say, a college program, or even a specialty program or journalism program at a university. At that point, I find the filmmaking, like the journey to becoming a filmmaker, really lies in telling stories and making films, you know, and with every project you learn a little bit more about the craft, a little bit more about getting pretty pictures, a little bit more about recording really good audio, which is a crucial thing to filmmaking, and then a little bit more about how you tell your story, the editing process. So we're actually in the edit suite right now where we edited the film in Toronto. And, you know, I think with every project, you know, and every project's different. I mean, I think that's part of the thing I love about the filmmaking is that, you know, you learn how to make a film, but then you apply that skill to, say, Bird's Nest Soup, or you apply that skill to maybe a music video. You know, like all of these things can constitute films and storytelling in different ways, right? So, again, you know, the process of learning how to become a filmmaker, I think that can happen very quickly, but then honing that craft and becoming a real expert or becoming the best at it, that takes, in my opinion, it takes a lifetime.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I mean, you guys all can be filmmakers right now as well. You know, if you have an iPad, it has a camera on it, it has editing software inside it. So if you have a story, you guys already can go out and make something, which is great, right?
Yeah, and I encourage all of you to harass your teachers to explore that idea, because I think it's a great way for you guys to express yourself and learn how to tell a story, and even learn how to empathize or learn about a different subject. Like, part of what I love about filmmaking is that, like, you know, you start to learn about a subject, and then you meet people whose lives are involved with it, and you learn, you know, over the process of this, we've become very knowledgeable about Bird's Nest Soup, right? But going into it, I didn't know anything. I didn't even know about it until Alan sort of approached me and we started talking about the project, right? So that's something I love about the filmmaking process, is that you just constantly get to learn about cool stuff you're interested in with every project. It's not like a job that you necessarily go to and find incredibly boring because you're not interested in the topic, right? Oh, Joe just popped back.
Hi, Joe.
Guys hear me?
I like that group.
Sorry, the airport internet's not cooperating at all. But I'm gonna try Mrs. Pillar's class. Have we visited her class yet?
No. Wait, do we have the control? Can we switch? No, eh? You have to do that.
No. Yep. I'm gonna. to a new classroom. So Mrs. Pillar's class's microphone is on. So if you guys have a question, go ahead.
Yes, sir.
There they are.
Hello.
Hi.
Quick, guys, make something up.
Make something up. All right. One of the questions they have is, who first realized that the nests were edible?
That's a good question. That's a good question. You want to tell that story?
You mean in history, or you mean between?
Yeah, I mean the way the story goes, or sort of what we learned, and it's kind of neat, is that now I won't be able to give you a specific name of who it was, but effectively what happened is when the way back when the Emperor of China would be sending out teams to effectively explore and look for for different lands to expand their kingdom to, right? And while they had all these people out exploring, whenever they came back, they'd always have to bring some sort of gift or something for the king. So in the instance of bird's nest soup, the explorers that were out came across these birds that made their nests out of spit. And so they decided this would be a great thing to bring back to the emperor to impress him, and I guess, as a gift, right? So they provided these nests to the emperor, and then that sort of story about it being something that would be, it is high in protein, and it does have a nutritional value to it, but effectively that got conveyed to the emperor, and then this sort of became this incredible commodity to eat and to consume, and if it was good enough for the king, then it was amazing for the people, and became this sort of elite thing, because there was a high cost to it, because it wasn't easy to get or grow or make, right? And so that's sort of how it came about that people started eating it. If that answers your question. I don't hear you guys. Oh, who do we have? I hear some audio, but I don't think we hear. We don't hear Wendy's group. I wonder if I can. You guys hear us, right? Can I control your microphones? Oh, I can control it. I can control who we look at. Can I unmute you?
Oh,
muted.
All right, can you hear us?
Oh, yeah, I hear you now.
Okay.
Hi, Wendy.
All right. Hi. Thank you for that answer. That was awesome. But we have one more quick question.
Yeah, let's hear it.
Have you ever thought about going back?
Ha! That's funny that you asked that. So we were talking about it, because what happened is, the question is, do we ever think about going back? I mean, it's a beautiful place, and the people were incredible and friendly, and so when we were there, one of the problems we had was that it was really hard to get the camera in a position where the people, where the guys were actually harvesting the nest, because it's so far up into the roof of the caves that we couldn't climb there, and they would just go, and they were gone. And they were also trying to get their work done while we were there, right? So recently we met these guys here in Toronto that have a company that do, they're all rock climbers, and they do rope rigging for science projects. So basically they'll help scientists or filmmakers get cameras or scientific instruments into very hard to reach places. And so we started talking about them, and we had mentioned this project, and I said, man, it would be great to go back with you guys, because you have this ability to get us into way more unique and close access to the guys as they're harvesting the nests. And so we started talking about that a bit, but it's a question of having a purpose or a reason to go back, right? Because largely we sort of made the film now at this point. But we did reach out as recently as yesterday. I actually heard back from Rika, who's the woman in the Philippines, our translator, and she reached out to them and said the owner of the island's still there, and the harvesters are still there, and they'll be harvesting twice this season. They'll be harvesting in the spring and in the fall, and they're happy to have us back. So so there may be an opportunity to go back in the future, but also it's very expensive to get back there, right? So having a reason to fly all that way, as much as it would be fun to just go and hang out, I think we'd have to have you know, a bigger purpose to go. So we'll see. To be continued.
Well, good luck to that.
Yeah, thanks.
Any other questions? No. All right, we'll share our screen time. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
So.
We need to go now. Bye-bye.
All right.
Bye.
See you guys. Thanks for coming. Thanks for the questions. Don't make films. All right. So what do we have left here? I can toggle through. Joe's gone. Does anyone? So I think
we have questions.
I think we've lost. Oh, hi.
Hi.
We've lost. We don't hear audio on anyone though, and I don't seem to be able to control that. Unless.
Wait. Everybody wait.
Oh, they've got questions.
Yeah. Is there a way you guys can you control your microphones? Yeah, you probably can.
Yeah, we're actually controlling ours, which is unusual.
Okay, there we go. We can control it.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, wait. So hang on. Maybe we should just moderate traffic here for it. So okay. So Carrie Lee's class has a question.
Hey,
right.
Sasha.
Let's have it, Sasha.
What is your next project?
Ah, that is also a good question. Okay, so the question from Sasha was, what is our next project? So one of the things, and actually we've been meeting here since 11 a.m. talking about our next project, so your timing is very good on that question. What we want to do is we want to make a TV series, a TV show out of this same idea. So what we would do is travel to remote places in the world and effectively follow the journey of these rare ingredients, you know? So we would basically pick another bunch of different ingredients and follow the individual journey of each of them. So that's sort of what we're planning now, is to try to turn this exact thing that you saw into a bit of a TV series.
Austin, where's my bag?
I feel like we just lost half of that classroom.
I imagine the school bell rang or something, and everyone.
Yeah, exactly. Where'd everyone go? Carrie,
We had someone from the board office here looking at this new type of learning, and so I brought two classes together, and that class had to leave. So yeah, but we're really enjoying the additional discussion. So we're gonna the new class is gonna hang out.
Cool. All right, and they're hanging out. All right. So I don't know where Joe's at, but is any other group have any other questions? If you do, all you can do is go up and there you go. Hi.
So this is Mrs. McCullough's class from Stony Creek. Actually, I went to school, Alan, with your sister.
Oh, wow, such a small world.
It is. So we have a question.
Okay.
Are the birds endangered? And if so, is that one of the reasons why they cost so much?
Ah, good question. You want to take that?
As far as we know right now, the birds are not endangered, but with anything like this, as expensive as the nests are, there's the danger of over-harvesting. And if they take too many nests, then the birds won't have a chance to lay their eggs. So it is definitely something that has to be watched very carefully, because if they get greedy and take the nests, then this will quickly become more endangered. Right now, what a lot of places are looking at doing is actually trying to find a way to farm the nests, so it's a little bit more controlled. And they are, in some places, making essentially in these buildings special rafters for the birds, and making the humidity and the right conditions so that it attracts the birds into these buildings, and they get to make the nests in the rafters. It also makes it much less dangerous to get the nests. But that's a great question, because this is something that's talked about a lot. You know, there's some people that believe we shouldn't be eating these nests at all anymore, because it affects the growth cycle of the birds, And other people believe that the nests are important because it's a very important part of the Chinese culture and history.
Thank you.
There you have it. Welcome. Oh, I see Joe at the airport. Joe, we've just been running with it. It's been great.
Any other questions?
Yes, we have questions.
That's your question? Okay, Christian has a question.
What do they need to do to prepare the nest to be eaten?
Ah, good question. So, so Chef Kwong, he sort of walks us through the process. But what they do is they take these, which are pretty hard, right? And they take this and they put it into water, and they let it soak in the water. And then in the water, the hard nest actually sort of dissolves and turns into almost like a clear noodle. You know, like it dissolves down into like a gelatin or like a sort of jello. And then they take that and they'll mix that with various ingredients. So when we were in Hong Kong in the film, they mixed it with chicken. So they pureed, like mashed down some chicken, and they'd put all that into a frying pan or a wok, and they would mix it all together. And then the chicken would at least give this some flavor, because it actually doesn't taste like much when we tried it on its own. We got to try it at the source where they harvest it, and we also got to try it in the fancy restaurant in Hong Kong. And both times it doesn't taste like much. So like if you mix it with chicken, bird's nest soup tastes like chicken. You mix it with crab, bird's nest soup tastes like crab, right? So, but that preparation is effectively to just dissolve it down into water and then cook with it almost like you cook with noodles or something. More questions?
Okay, Haley. Where did the birds originate?
Where did the birds originate? Well, so the question is, where did the birds originate? And I mean, this type of bird, like the swiftlet, the type of bird that it is, a swiftlet, those are pretty prominent everywhere. You can see swiftlets all over the world, really. We have them in Canada, the US, all over. But the cave swiftlets, these specific ones, seem to live more around Southeast Asia, or, you know, all of these, like, so if you think about Thailand, Singapore, the Philippines, that part of Southeast Asia, Indonesia is another popular spot for them. These types of cave swiftlets, this sort of version of them that makes these nests, live in that particular area. So the swiftlet's a more common bird, but these specific kinds of swiftlets that make their nests with the spit live in Southeast Asia.
Okay.
Question. See ya. Hello.
Hi.
Hello.
Okay, we have one more question. Oh.
Do you have other topics they have worked on too, or just this one?
Sorry, say that question again.
Have y'all worked on other topics, not just this one?
In terms of films?
Yeah, like not just working on this, but like other kinds of animals too.
Yeah, I mean, well, Alan's done some pretty big. He just finished. You want to talk about Kodachrome? Kind of unrelated.
Yeah, I mean, so I work for other people as well as we make our own stuff. I finished a movie last year, a couple years ago, called Kodachrome, and that will be coming out on Netflix soon. And it has, you guys probably won't know the old guys, Ed Harris and Jason Sudeikis, but you may know or have heard of Elizabeth Olsen. So it stars those three. And then on the documentary side, well, we both worked on many different documentaries, but I guess more recently, I worked on a small film called Ride for Promise, and it's about a young man, 24 years old, who decided to bicycle across Canada from Vancouver to Halifax to raise awareness about living in public housing.
Yeah, and the last project I worked on last year that some of you guys might find interesting is was called the Canada C3 and expedition. And what we did was we took a ship, an icebreaker, from Toronto, and we basically took it 23,000 kilometers around the whole coastline of Canada. So we went all the way up the East Coast, through the Northwest Passage, around Alaska, and then all the way back down to Victoria. So we literally went around every inch of Canada's coastline in a big icebreaker. And actually, Facebook was a major sponsor on that. So if you guys search Canada and then the letter C and the number 3, you'll be able to see all the different films. We made about 120 different films from different communities and areas, some of them about food, some of them about culture and people and reconciliation. And it was a really neat project. It was really great to get to see the whole country that way from the sea. Who else do we have there? Was there another question? I feel I see a group waving. I think you guys need to unmute your microphone. Is there like a little icon thingy that you can click at the top?
Can you guys hear us?
See it?
Hello?
Or better yet,
Hello?
you see the microphone thing at the top? We can't hear you. We can see your enthusiasm. Or you could like grab a piece of paper old school and write it down. You could text us by writing it on a piece of paper.
Okay, right. Okay, 1 second.
Oh.
Okay, 1 second. Okay, here we go. Okay, one word. Okay.
Oh, we're gonna write it down.
Okay. Rhymes with green. Okay.
Can you hear us?
Can't hear you though.
Hear you.
Oh, Isabella.
Okay, here we go. Unicorn. Okay. First word, unicorn. Okay. No. I understand. I'm just messing with you.
Yeah.
Somebody, I feel like someone's writing a question. Yeah.
Stop. Can you hear us? Maybe she's talking about the headphones. Maybe she's headphones.
Okay.
Stop.
You're the last group. You're the last group in the chat. I think there's one other group, but it's just a camera pointing at a.
Oh, what about writing it on the whiteboard or chalkboard?
Yeah, I think that. Are you writing a question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Stop it.
Okay. Got it. This is gonna be a long. I can feel this is gonna be a long question with multiple parts.
Okay.
Okay. Here we go. Okay. Why are the nests so expensive? All right, good question. So why are the nests so expensive? You want to answer that?
Well, we can both try and answer that.
I mean, ultimately, they're very hard to get to, right? So it's very hard to collect them. Someone has to risk their life to climb up a cliff and scrape the nest off, and then the nest has to travel all the way back to Hong Kong, and then ultimately be delivered to a kitchen or a cook that can make them. So that high risk factor combined with the long distance it has to travel ultimately makes the cost of it so high, right?
One more question.
I hear something.
There's something.
One more question.
One more question.
One more question. Okay. I feel like Joe is trying to get back.